So again, I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. Appreciate your presence, and I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. This evening, I want to look at an account from Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. You're probably familiar with this account. I want us to look at this and see how this applies to us in our relationship with the Lord. Now, to set the scene, right before this, Jesus had fed the 5,000, and he was, as it's going to say here, he was staying behind to dismiss the crowds, and then he goes and prays, and he's sending the disciples on in the boat across the sea. So let's read Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. In this case, it just means the wind was working against them. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. The fourth watch of the night is between like 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So it's either very late in the night, or sometimes we would say very extremely early in the morning, right? So 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is the idea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and beginning to sink. He cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, if we look at verse 22 and just kind of imagine that I told Kim to take the car and drive to Orville, and I will meet her there, right? Now, she's probably going to need some convincing that she's going to be able to just leave with the car, right? And she's going to give me some weird looks and wonder what I'm up to and how am I going to get there, that type of thing, right? But notice that Jesus made the disciples, he made them take the boat and start the crossing without him, and this was intentional. And the word used here for made, it means forced. He forced them to go without him. So Jesus stayed behind to dismiss the crowds, and he prayed alone. And then later, after praying, the boat, again, is in the middle of the sea, and the sea is not calm. They're being kind of battered by the waves. The wind is also hostile to them, and it's that fourth watch of the night, very late at night, around 3 a.m. or a little after. And that's when Jesus shows up walking on the sea. Now, they obeyed him and they left him taking the boat. But what did they expect? Did they think Jesus would get another boat, or that maybe he would walk around on the shore to where they were going? We don't really know for sure what they were expecting, but I think it's a safe bet that they weren't expecting Jesus to show up walking on the water, right? So I think they were a little surprised, a little shocked, but sometimes Jesus doesn't always do what we expect. Sometimes he surprises us. Remember that God's ways are higher than our ways. We may not always understand why we're put in a particular situation sometimes. Here the Lord sent them out on that boat, and he knew what was coming. He knew what would be going on. He knew the wind and the waves would be rough. But he sent them into that difficult situation. And then he came to them in that difficult situation, and he calmed it down. Now, if we look at this image here, they were afraid when he came to them on the sea. This isn't necessarily the best image, but the idea of this image is that he looks kind of ghostly, right? He looks kind of in the distance, kind of vague. And they were afraid when they saw him on the sea, right? Again, they're not expecting this. And that's their first human reaction. It would be shocking and surprising to see someone walking across the sea. So here they are. They're struggling against the waves. They're rowing. And they're rowing hard to get across the water. And this ghostly figure walks up, and it's scary. And sometimes we have to remember, sometimes following the Lord can be scary. Sometimes it is frightening to step out there and risk getting into trouble, right? I mean, not trouble like with the Lord, but just risky stepping out there and standing for the Lord and doing what he says we need to do. So we may find ourselves in an unexpected situation, is the idea. Sometimes it may be a situation we do not fully understand. Every situation is not always clear and easy to define. And sometimes we don't understand the difficulties we're going through. Now, if we take a moment and look at Mark's account tells us a little something different. We're just going to look at a couple of verses of Mark's account. Now, when evening came, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land, speaking about Jesus, of course. Then he saw them straining at rowing. He's looking out, and he sees them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. Now, about the fourth watch of the night, again, that very late time, he came to them walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. So that's the detail we get here from Mark's account that we don't get from the others. He would have passed them by. Why would Jesus pass them by? Because they were not really in any danger. The situation was difficult. Yes, they were straining. It was hard. But this is not like another occurrence that we know of where they all thought they were going to die. This is just a difficult situation. They would have made it across, and he wasn't worried about them. He was going to go on by. But he came to them because they saw him, and they were afraid. Initially, like I said, he was just going to walk on across. He was going to meet them on the other side. This was going to be, and it still is, going to be one of those miracles that we read about in the Gospels where Jesus just does something, and they don't make any big deal out of it at all. He makes his way through the crowd. He gets away, or he does something, miraculous. So this is one of those type of situations. But to me, the idea is sometimes when we are in a difficult situation, and maybe it is something that we think we should be able to manage or probably could manage on our own, but maybe we're getting faint of heart, or maybe something unexpected, makes us afraid. Jesus is still ready to come to us. He's still ready to come to us and help us. He doesn't want us to be afraid or to fear. If we look at what he said in our account in Matthew, he says, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." Now, what this means and what he's saying here, when Jesus said this, as it's written in the Greek, now, in my translation, again, it says, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." But in the Greek, a kind of a literal way of saying this, the way it's written is, "Cheer up, I am." It's just two words. It's just, "I am, don't fear." So, if we think about that, here they are. They're worried, probably. They're struggling. Like I said, they weren't going to die, but a difficult situation. And then Jesus says to them, cheer up. He says, take courage, right? If you think of cheer up or take courage, he's how we get down, right? We get down, and maybe depressed or we're in that difficult situation. We've got our head down. And he's saying, no, cheer up, cheer up. And then he's saying, basically, I am here. God is here, right? And he says, don't fear. So if we look at that from the viewpoint of a parent, say, if you imagine, especially a mother, you have a little child, skins their knee, hurts themselves, and they kind of put their arms around them. They say, don't worry, mommy's here, that type of thing, right? And it's kind of funny, but that is really, in a way, what Jesus is saying. He's saying, cheer up, don't worry, it's going to be okay, I'm here. Now, that's a wild, that's not an exact quote, right? But I mean, that's the essence of what he's telling them. He shows up with power to help us in these situations. Then, what happens? Peter says, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And Jesus replies, come. Now, I know we pick on the apostles a lot, and I don't mean to have any disrespect for them, but why is it just Peter? Jesus says, Peter, he calls him, he says, you of little faith. Does that mean the others, he's the one that actually got out of the boat. Does that mean the others actually had no faith or less faith at that point? And what kept the others in the boat? Was it fear of failing or just not trust? Notice that Peter was successful, and then he failed for a moment, and then the Lord made him successful again and brought him to the boat. So Peter was stepping out in faith. He started doing well. He did walk out to Jesus, or out close to Jesus. And then he had a moment of doubt where he was distracted and noticing the wind, right? So, but the thing to think about was the wind was always there the whole time. The wind was there when he was succeeding in walking on the water, right? It's just that was the moment when he noticed it and he had that doubt. And he forgot Jesus was the one making this possible. It wasn't anything he was doing. It was what Jesus was doing. But then if we look at that as well, did he drown? No, he was sinking, right? But who saved him? The Lord saved him, right? Even though he had that moment of doubt, he had that failing. He had that moment of fear and he was sinking, and who did he call to? He called to the Lord, the only one who could save him, right? He didn't call to the guys in the boat, throw out a rope. He didn't start swimming toward the boat. He called on the Lord. So this is a principle that we need to understand when we step out on faith sometimes. We're still going to need the Lord sometimes because we're going to have our moments. We're going to have bad times, right? When we step out in faith, it is through the power of Jesus that we succeed. And it's when we think it's about us, or we start looking at the other problems and difficulties, that we start to fail. Because we're not the ones with the power. It's the Lord that has the power. He's the one that does things for us. When we take our eyes off him and we think it's up to us, we stumble. Then we see the obstacles, the problems, and how hard it is. We start seeing that, and then we have fear, and we fall. But if we keep our eyes on Jesus, he makes us successful in following him through the difficulties, through the struggles. And this is about being a faithful follower of Jesus. Notice the wind didn't quit until Jesus got them both back to the boat. Then it says the wind ceased. And also see that when Peter cried out, notice how Jesus responded. Immediately, Jesus reached out and grabbed Peter. I don't think Peter was under the water like this picture impresses, gives you the impression of. But at the same time, this lets you know, it gives you that impression that, yes, Jesus is ready to reach out and help you and pull you back up, right? So now the Lord responds to our cries for help. We may not always see that response or understand that response in the moment. Again, the Lord's ways are higher than ours, and he knows what we really need. He's a father to us and knows what we need more than we do. His response and his help will be what we really need, even if we do not understand it or see it at the time. I don't know about y'all, but for me, usually when I'm out of a situation and I'm like further down the road, that's when I can look back and see what I needed more clearly, right? When I'm in the middle of it, a lot of times I don't really know what I need. I just need the Lord's help. So, and that's just like the apostles here. If you notice their response when Jesus and Peter got into the boat and the wind ceased, they worshiped Jesus and they called him the Son of God. They acknowledged Jesus for who he is. They had that clarity of vision, right? That moment of clarity. He is, I am, God in the flesh. And are we grateful like that when the Lord helps us and gets us through our bad days and our bad times? Do we praise and worship him for the times he's bailed us out? So I want us to look at one further account, a little bit in John. Now, something John tells us in chapter 6, verses 18 through 21, he tells us something a little different. There's a little more detail to a couple of things here. Then the sea arose because a great wind was blowing. That's kind of hinted at in Matthew, but said a little differently here. Lets you know that the wind is what's whipping up the sea. So when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea, drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Then they willingly received him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land where they were going. So there's a few more details here in John's account. The sea was rough because of the great wind. They were 3 or 4 miles out, so a little more of a definition there. But notice at the very end, immediately they were at their destination. Once Jesus was in the boat, all the problems were solved. So this should tell us we always want to have Jesus in our boat, so to speak, right? We always want to have Jesus with us. But did they know how all this happened, really? Could they explain it, how he got them across like that? Well, not that they ever mentioned, I'll say that, and I think all of us and them would agree that that was the power of God, right? That's just another one of those miracles, like I was mentioning, where Jesus does something, and they don't really speak anything further about it. You can continue on reading in John, and there's no real reaction to this, just that it happened. That's the way it is. So it's one of those types of miracles that the Lord did. So we bring the Lord our problems. We get him into our boat, and he takes us through those things. He gets us across to the other side. We don't always know how, but we can always remember what he told the disciples. To cheer up, I am, don't fear. Cheer up because things are going to change. God is here with you. Don't be afraid. In closing, I want us to see that this is one time, just one time, that they had an unexpected encounter with Jesus. I don't think they were expecting him to come walking across the sea like that. And they had a lot more, but I feel like this was a special encounter, that it changed them. It made them see him clearly and understand who he was, or who he is. My apologies, he is. Because they saw him as the Son of God, which he is. So, have we encountered Christ? Has he changed us? Are we being changed by our time with him? Do we have daily encounters with Jesus? And I'm talking about really in his word, but I think all of you would get that and understand that. Are we open to follow him, and do we obey him even when we don't understand? Just like they went across the sea in the boat. There's a lot of things in life that change us, experiences and injuries and sickness, and not all these things are good. Some things are and some things aren't. But the things we go through, the encounters we have in life, sometimes, they're pain and suffering, sometimes they're love and joy. They all change us in some way. If we're not changed by knowing Jesus, then we've not encountered the Lord. If we're not different than we were 10 years ago, then we're not following the Lord. I think that's pretty obvious. If we look ahead 1 year or 5 years, do we expect to see a difference in ourselves? Are we willing to allow Jesus to change us? We have a chance to have a special encounter with Jesus. Every day we have this opportunity to be changed by having that relationship with the Lord. But it all starts with one encounter. That first time we come to Jesus, like Peter getting out of the boat, we have to take that step of faith, right? And that's just the start. That's just the beginning. So I want to encourage all of us to not let the fear of the unknown or let the doubts keep you in the boat. We can trust the Lord. We can always trust in Him. If we're going to stumble, we're going to fall, we're going to start to sink, but He's there for us. He's going to raise us up if we will call out to Him. That's part of the gospel message, really. Jesus restores us. He brings us up to Him. But it all starts with that first encounter. The first time we come to be changed by the Lord. And if anyone here this evening is in need of that change, an encounter with Jesus, to begin a relationship with Him, or to renew a relationship with Jesus if we've strayed, or if there's anything else that we could do this evening possibly to pray with you or to help you with, please come forward as we stand and sing.